I just think that there's no way to love the church for who she is without being first terribly disillusioned with her. And it's kind of like forgiveness. There's no way to forgive somebody unless you acutely feel every bit of the hurt they did to you. Boom!
And we're here. Are we live?
We are live. Hey, Mike and Preston here.
The Mike and Preston show.
We're doing Vox in the Raw today.
Vox in the Raw, dude. Let's do that. Vox in the Raw, Raw in the Vox. Nah, I like Vox in the Raw better.
So, Preston, you have wandered consistently throughout your career into very non-controversial areas, right? So we started with nonviolence, and then we went to hell. Yeah. And then we went to, or was hell first? I don't remember.
Hell came first.
And hell was first, and then nonviolence perfectly.
Yeah.
And then now you are the head of the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender.
Woo! You know what's funny is even when I was doing scholarly stuff, are you familiar with the New Perspective?
Of course, Paul? Dude, are
so
you kidding me?
So I just realized, just the other day, I thought, I was actually doing controversy before the Race in Hell and in the scholarly circles, because I was wrestling with New Perspective stuff, and I was going back and forth on where I was at on that, and took kind of a nuanced middle of the road perspective.
Nice. See, to me there are six gospel writers, the four in the Bible: Dallas Willard and N.T. Wright. So I don't even question him anymore. I just accept whatever he says.
Man. He's so good. He's so good.
He's so good. Yeah. Do you, and so what do you do? I mean, you're the director of this institute. What do you do as a director of an institute?
So the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender started in 2017. Our mission statement is to help pastors, leaders, and churches engage questions about faith, sexuality, and gender with theological faithfulness and courageous love. So basically, I help. You threw me that softball, man. You knew I was going to swing at it.
That's so good.
We exist as an organization to help Christian leaders, not just pastors, and actually the non-pastor thinker, leader, whatever makes up, obviously, maybe 40% of the people we're reaching. But we do have a slight focus on people who are doing kind of church ministry to help them think through both the theology of sexuality and gender, but also all the practical stuff too. We call it like a pastoral theology of LGBTQ plus related questions. So
that's been an empty space as we've all tried to. I mean, I don't know if it is still, but it's been an empty space in church world as churches are looking at each other, going, "What the heck do we do with this?"
Right.
With these wonderful people and this issue.
Right. There's people doing bridge building ministries between the church and the non-churched LGBTQ community. There's a great organization called Lead Them Home, which has been training church leaders on LGBT inclusion, the pastoral side. There's also affirming organizations like the Reformation Project.
Yep.
Q Christian would be that's a little bit of a broader space, but that do kind of theological training on an affirming side. As far as I know, I don't know anybody that does a blend of theological pastoral training that does dig into all the complexities of the theology, but doesn't stay there, that actually does do a lot. I mean, 50% of what we do is the pastoral stuff on the other hand. So there's not a whole lot that I know that's doing exactly what we do.
No, I don't. I really don't think so. And to what degree? So the book you wrote, People to Be Loved. We talked about it on the podcast. We meaning Andy and I. Yeah. So that had to be an interesting venture into this space. What was the reception like from both sides? I would imagine both sides aren't super satisfied with where you're at.
Yeah. So both sides is really broad.
True.
With the polarizing extreme ends of both of those sides, for lack of better terms, the far left thinks I'm a Nazi and that I hate gay people. The far right think I'm affirming of same-sex marriage and believe I'm going down. I'm damned to hell.
Yeah.
So
sorry, that's my wife. Sorry.
I love that you hung up on her to,
I did. Dude, it's Preston Sprinkle. Come on, man.
So yeah, the polarizing voices pretty much mirror each other.
It's funny, isn't it?
Almost verbatim. Verbatim. They don't try to understand what I'm actually saying. I mean, I just today I was looking at my Facebook page and I had a ton of people saying I'm not only damned to hell, but leading people to hell because I am. And they're responding to a post that I advertise about a leadership training I'm doing with a link to my statement on sexuality and faith and everything that's crystal clear that I hold to the traditional view. So they couldn't even they didn't even have an interest in clicking on the link just because I was talking about faith, sexuality, and gender. They were putting all these gifs of people jumping into the fires of hell and all this stuff. So, but then responding to them were the people on the far left. They were equally hating me for the exact opposite reason. The only difference in language was that the liberals were swearing and the Christians were the quote unquote Christians were not.
Yeah.
But even then, I was like, I think they made the conservatives so angry because they realized that they're both saying the same thing. And I think they even got some of the fundamentalists to start swearing and cussing and stuff. So.
Now that's when you know you've nailed it right there. That sweet spot. And so your view and the view kind of people to be loved. The thing that's so interesting is so if people are coming into the LGBTQ conversation, I recommend Matthew Vines as kind of the best popular level, you know what I mean by that, sort of entrance into the affirming position. Yeah. And then I recommend your book as a very kind entrance into the non-affirming position.
Right. Yeah.
And so part of why you're getting crap, right, is because you're not totally affirming, but you're not non-affirming in the way that you should be. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That I would passionately articulate and maintain, and if I need to defend a traditional view of marriage, I do. I'm not allowed to say this, but I think it's among the clearer teachings in Scripture. But I would turn around.
Hold on a second. Wow. No, I mean, that's a huge statement these days, right?
Yeah. And even, in a world where everything is just your interpretation, people don't like to say it's clear because it is a subjective statement. Sometimes I say it's clear to kind of provoke people to react,
That'll work.
But I would turn right around in the very next breath and challenge the conservative church to not just try to love LGBT people, but delight in and laugh with and dine with and have them over to watch your kids and to, share bread over the table and to learn from. Like you can actually get in a conversation with a married gay couple and actually learn relational wisdom from that couple. I mean, maybe I'm not saying just because you're gay means you've nailed it relationally, but just to extend that grace leash much farther than the church has ever thought they could extend it. Yeah. And so people see me as schizophrenic sometimes. I don't know what to do with it, but I truly, and I know I'm not throwing, the J card down as a Trump. I mean, when you look at the life of Jesus, I just see that. I mean, he upholds a very high standard of obedience, like the Sermon on the Mount. Try reading the Sermon on the Mount and then going outside and doing that. It's like, oh my gosh, like he cared deeply about obedience, but then he radically loved those who fell short of that standard of obedience. And so I do think that Jesus, I think he nailed it. Yeah. Imagine that.
Shocking.
But I think his approach to what I call let's just say, those who have been seen as socially unacceptable sinners by the religious elite of his day, that almost perfectly maps upon how the church has gone about the LGBT conversation. So I just look at the life of Jesus and say, how did he treat those who, are similar to how we have historically treated LGBT people? So,
when in all of your research for the book, but in all these conversations you're having, you're going around the country talking to churches and people. What is the single best argument for the affirming point of view?
Yeah,
I'll give you mine, or no, you give me yours, and then if it's the same one, I'll agree. Okay. But there's one I have too that I haven't heard answered well.
Okay.
So you start.
Oh.
Sorry. I was very unclear about how that was going to go.
So I will give you three that in my journey I have found to be wow, it kind of took me by surprise. I was like, wow, how would I respond to this in a way that isn't just trying to refute the argument, but truly is understanding the argument, the evidence used to support it. Is like genuinely, is the evidence valid or not? If it's valid, then I need to keep, looking into this. The first argument that challenged me was the fact that most male same-sex relationships in the larger biblical era, in the Greco-Roman period, were exploitative. They were between people of different power differentials, a citizen and a non-citizen, a master and a slave, older man, younger boy. We don't see a lot of evidence for adult consensual male same-sex relationships, so that when you read Romans 1, 1 Corinthians 6, and 1 Timothy 2, 1 Timothy 1, the three passages that prohibit same-sex relationships, you have to ask a question: does Paul have a certain kind of same-sex relationship in view that's exploitative and oppressive, or is he ruling out same-sex relationships categorically? That would be the one. And I could give a whole response to that if you want me to, or I can give the other two.
No, I just want to hear the best ones.
Okay, yeah.
On that side, hit your other two.
The second one that I encountered that was popular. Well, it was popular back in the 90s, and it's been resurrected by partly by James Brownson and then Matthew Vines, is the so-called excessive lust view, meaning that what Paul is critiquing is not male same-sex relationships per se, but that he is echoing a particular Greco-Roman view that same-sex relationships, among men at least, were a result of excessive lust. And the problem isn't the same sex aspect of it, but the fact that they are giving into uncontrollable lust and are exploring new kind of kinky territory with other guys.
Right.
In fact, so just to be honest, when I encountered the argument, I said, man, I think this might be the most compelling affirming argument. I need to spend a lot of time wrestling with it. So I actually wrote 2 peer-reviewed journal articles interacting with that view. I said, look, if I can't respond to this, then maybe it's right. Maybe I need to, go with that. Yeah. But then after looking into it, I was like, man, I think there's several logical and historical leaps they're making there. But the third one would be the whole idea of sexual orientation being unknown to the writers, that biblical writers just thought that everybody was straight, and you can kind of, if you're acting on, or, and if you're going to be same-sex attracted, you're kind of choosing it. And now we know from the last, 50 plus years or so that sexual orientation is something that is not chosen, that it is, inborn maybe. And that if the biblical writers knew of what we now know about sexual orientation, then they wouldn't have said the things that they did. So those would be the 3 most popular, ones that we'd have to wrestle with. So can I refute them, or should I just let the audience wrestle with that? I'm fine either. I mean, I've responded to it in many places.
Yeah, no, let's let them sit. To me, I'd love your thoughts on this one, because I'm with you on those, absolutely. But I was talking to Mackey from the Bible Project, and we were talking about the Old Testament concept of accommodation, and he makes a big deal, rightly so, about how God is dealing with suboptimal conditions. The law is not God's ideal. The law is triage.
Right. Yeah.
And if you understand it that way, and you take divorce as kind of the test case of even, where Jesus is like, yeah, but hello. I've had some gay men agree with me that the ideal is in Genesis 1 and 2, but they don't fit that ideal. Why wouldn't God accommodate to same-sex attraction the same way he accommodated to polygamy?
Right.
The same way he accommodated to slavery, the same way he accommodated to patriarchy.
Yeah.
Right. So why?
Yeah,
so
because yeah.
Come on, and I haven't read that. That's a Mike Erre one, and I'm sure it's out there by much smarter people. C.S. Lewis, I'm sure, wrote about it, years ago. But that's one I've really been wrestling with. It's like, because what do you do? Like the biggest argument, we had people at our church Vox that were unbelievably in love with Jesus, and here they're lesbians and they're married.
Yeah.
So what are my options there? My options are, well, hey, you should get divorced and be celibate.
Yeah.
Right, and then you're living in God's will, or you should be excluded from the church community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I mean, there just isn't there's no room in there. And yet these are dear friends and they're wonderful people. And there's fruit of Jesus following.
Probably more fruit than many.
Than many, yes. Yes. Than many people on your Facebook page.
Oh, man. Yeah, so there's several. I mean, there's several moving parts there that we can wrestle with, and we might have to pull apart each part and examine it on its own terms.
Love it. I love it.
Let me say this. In the I edited a book called "The Bible and Homosexuality," or Two Views on the Bible, Homosexuality in the Church. And there's 2 essays by traditionalists and 2 essays by affirming Christians. One of the essays by the traditionalist, Stephen Holmes, he's a professor at St. Andrews, the theologian. He argues for traditional marriage, but he makes the accommodation argument. He actually, at the end of his essay, he kind of suggests maybe we should pastorally accommodate, given the kind of situation we're in. So, that argument has been made from a traditional perspective. Here's my one big pushback, and this was my pushback to him is, yes, you do see, I'll call it a trajectory of accommodation. And we could I would put violence in the same area where violence is, and this is my whole argument in my book, Fight. I had 3 chapters on the Old Testament, because what do you do with the Old Testament when you're arguing for nonviolence, Right. And what we see is God meets Israel where they are at. And the law, as you suggested, is tolerating to some extent and regulating an imperfect ethical system that God found Israel in. Polygamy was just such a part of society that he didn't God, the law doesn't like promote it. It does regulate it though. It doesn't, but it doesn't end it. But what you see in these accommodating ethics with patriarchal society, kind of misogyny in the Old Testament, violence, divorce, and what was you said another one? Slavery. All of those, though, if you follow those throughout Scripture into the New Testament, you see the ethical trajectory moving away from just simply accommodating towards it. The trajectory is moving toward the Genesis 1 and 2 ideal. So that divorce, Jesus tightens in the reins on that. You definitely see misogyny. I mean, Jesus elevates women like far above any other. Violence, it's not kill your enemy, it's love your enemy. And what was the other one? Slavery. Slavery, that one can be complicated, but Paul doesn't end the institution of slavery, but he does kind of gut it from the inside out. I mean, some of the things he says about masters honoring your slaves, that would just be unheard of. And then if you follow that trajectory on into early church history, when Christianity did kind of take over, they did end slavery. Right. So with those kind of ethical trajectories that begin with some sort of accommodation in the Old Testament, you see them moving towards the Genesis 1 and 2 ideal. And I would say you just don't see any accommodation to same-sex relationships, or even things like adultery, and I hate using, these aren't analogies, okay? But let me just say this. You can go read the verses. All the sexual things in Leviticus 18, they're pretty straightforward across the Old and New Testament. There is no accommodating, then permitting. And you could take other ethical questions like adultery, or even like caring for the poor. Like that is from Genesis to Revelation. Believers should care for the poor. It's almost like part of our identity. So throughout Scripture, you see trajectories moving in all different directions, sometimes towards from permission to prohibition, sometimes from prohibition to permission. Sometimes it's just prohibition, or permission. So we can't just look at a trajectory like divorce that moves a certain direction and then map that on same-sex relationships. We have to consider each one on their own. Anyway, I'll stop. No. That's No, that's good. But that's where then your other 3 arguments come in to play more powerfully, particularly the one that would with the orientation and yes, and that's where you'd go, well, the gender dysphoria stuff. I mean, we're into conversations that the Scripture just never envisioned. And just stamping a Bible verse on something just doesn't appreciate all the nuance. So my response, again, if I were devil's advocate, I would be saying, hey, I think you're absolutely right about trajectories, but in this case, there's new information that the biblical writers did not have. Well, I would push back on the orientation one. I think is, let me just be provocative. I think it's both ethically and scientifically invalid. Whoa. because what do we know about orientation? From a scientific perspective, the more we study it, the more we don't really understand where it comes from, how immutable it is. I mean, we now know from the work of like Lisa Diamond that same-sex desires among women is incredibly fluid and shifts and change. And even among men now, since 2014, there's been several scientific studies coming out that are kind of like, man, these airtight categories of gay, straight, bisexual are just not airtight at all. So if we take the definition, so all I have to say, I think let me just be as
this is Vox in the Raw, dude. It's Vox in the Raw.
If I was an atheist and hated the Bible,
yeah, perfect,
I would still say it just doesn't really follow to rely upon this real wet sand, hard to understand thing called sexual orientation and use that as the foundation to form our ethical views from. Maybe in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we'll have a much better understanding. But to say that some people experience a desire for this, therefore it must be okay to act on, like that just doesn't work scientifically nor ethically. So ethically, so the definition of orientation is an enduring pattern of emotional, romantic, and or sexual attraction to somebody of the same sex would be same-sex orientation. So if we went back to Paul and Jesus and said, okay, I know this behavior is immoral, but I know a person who has an enduring emotional, romantic, and sexual desire to do that act. I think
that
Paul
they didn't choose. That they didn't choose.
That they didn't choose.
Right.
But I think Paul and Jesus, given the sexual ethic we see in the New Testament, kind of shrugged their shoulders and say, since when does internal inborn desire justify behavior? I mean, or let's broaden it out. Here's where people use the orientation argument. I say, okay, here's my one plea. If you're going to use that, if you're going to say that in an unchosen desire that's really strong, and maybe you might have the desire from birth to death. If your ethical argument is that if that's true of somebody, then they should be allowed to act on that desire, at least be consistent with anybody who has a desire they didn't choose, it's really strong, doesn't seem to be going away, then at least be fair to everybody and say that I'm going to be consistent in my ethic and say, if that's you, then you're allowed to act on that desire. But I'm not going to go with the analogies. I'll let my audience.
No, don't do that. but wouldn't then the counter be, but the way that we regulate between the desires that we permit and the desires that we outlaw are whether or not they hurt another.
That is a really popular secular ethic in the West. The kind of, as long as it doesn't harm people, it's okay. But that's not, I don't think that's the only criteria of Christian ethics, or even just, are you familiar with the work of Jonathan Haidt?
Oh, yes.
So he, in his book, The Righteous Mind, he talks about this from a secular perspective. Yeah. And he lays out that the sort of don't harm other people is a very, very Western, modern, almost white ethic. And it was him that after he traveled to India and saw that, oh man, there's all kinds of other ethical moral impulses that people have, like purity or shame or honor, and, I could, if I took a dump and wiped my butt with the American flag, I'm not harming anybody. But a lot of people would kind of say, like, that just doesn't feel right. Or Jonathan Haidt uses the example of if you run over your dog, you actually kill your dog, it's sad, you have a little funeral, and then you take him into the kitchen, butcher him up, and eat the meat of your dog. You eat your dog. You're not harming anybody. You're actually making a good use of meat that's just going to go to waste. But most people would say, for some reason, that just doesn't, I don't know, like, so, and these are maybe somewhat creepy, whatever. But I mean, he actually uses those illustrations to show that there are other moral impulses that go beyond just harming another human. Obviously, we don't want to harm another human, but we can't reduce ethics to as long as it doesn't harm anybody, as long as it's a byproduct of your desire or whatever, then it's okay. And this is coming from a secular perspective. I mean, Jonathan Haidt's an atheistic Jew, and he says, man, and his, well, I can keep going, but real quick, his whole reason for doing this is because he was on the far left ideologically and politically, and he kept getting frustrated at why the conservatives keep winning. And then when he looked into this, he was like, look, the left only uses the harm argument. They keep writing the harm argument when there's 5 or 6 other moral impulses that humans have. And conservatives keep drawing on those. And that's why in his mind, conservatives kept winning, is because they are appealing to all these other moral impulses like authority, respect for authority. You know, it's the conservative that's going to be upset if somebody mops the floor with an American flag. The liberal's not going to care too much, you know, but you know, the conservatives are tapping into all these other moral impulses. But, you know, and when I was reading his work, I'm like, well, a lot of those other moral impulses are found right in Scripture. I think he would even agree with that. He's pretty well versed in the biblical text. So anyway, I'll stop. I've been talking too much, and this is a joint podcast. So
No, dude, I love it. Preston. One of the reasons why you are awesome is you get wound up. You have a great personality, lots of insight. I just love it, man. So, of course, I'm going to try to throw something out controversial, and you're going to run with it, baby, because that's what you do. I love it. No, I love it. I just think, and I wanted to do that because it's so rare to have people speaking directly on this. Like Church Clarity, you know, is you know, I mean, right? We did a whole show on just that, and it was like,
really,
well, yeah. And
what did you think about that? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, the impulse behind it, I think, is very fair, and just, right.
You would explain to our audience what it is first.
Oh, yeah. Church Clarity is, a website that ranks churches on a scale, and I don't remember the exact wording, but pretty much from, are they clearly unaffirming? Are they clearly affirming? Are they murky? Are they sort of leaning unaffirming? Right. Are they leaning affirming? Or are they murky? And there's a kind of a don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
And as people would come to to a church, they could enter the church and then research kind of where the church was, and then not be betrayed later. Because what I hear from gay friends is just the bait and switch.
Yeah,
hey, we welcome everybody, but you can't serve here, and here. Right. We don't let you do children's ministry. We won't let you lead. You know, blah 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 blah.
But sometimes they tell that to them 2 years down the road.
Right.
Like they get plugged into community. They have all these relationships, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm getting married. Can you marry me? Oh, yeah, we don't believe in that. Like, you let me sit in your pews for 2 years before you actually told me where you're at? Yeah. So it is. So the I think the desire behind it is magnificent. The issues come in for a community, and kind of a community like ours, where we wanted to escape the affirming, non-affirming binary. Yeah.
And so we don't want it clear. Now that doesn't mean we don't have opinions or we don't have convictions about it or whatever. It just means that the way we described our church was we want a place where affirming and non-affirming people can love and serve each other. Because whatever theological position you take, our churches are full of this, right? And it's not going away. Yeah. And so where would you put us on that scale? Right? We just didn't fit. And not only that, but we had people who would come to our community and say, hey, I'm glad you're not affirming. And they were gay. Mm-hmm. We've been to affirming churches, and at least in their experience, the churches spent more time talking about how great they were to be non-affirming, or to be affirming, excuse me, and not, the bigger stuff. So it's an interesting attempt, and I'm in favor of, if I were a gay Christian, I would want something like this. I would not want to be betrayed by the slippery language of Christian ministries. But it didn't, I don't think it maps exactly how churches are trying to process through this issue.
Yeah.
And what I think it does is elevates, and I understand why, but I just don't agree that is the most important issue.
Right.
Now, if I were gay, I would think differently. But on any issue, I don't think there's one litmus test that describes the whole community. I just don't think that's how Jesus works.
Right.
And I don't think his body should work that way either. I think there should be places where affirming and non-affirming people interact, and it's not the new humanity when just the people who all think the same way and act the same way are together.
Yeah. That's good. I had several problems with the Church Clarity, and I talked to had a long conversation with one of the guy who founded it. I'm blanking on his name now.
Yeah.
Did you have him on or somebody on, or no? You guys just talked about it.
We just talked about it but we used their website language.
Okay, so I didn't because their big thing is just it needs to be on the website. So here,
right.
I 100% agree that the bait and switch thing that absolutely we should not do. That churches should be clear about where they're at, even if they're not sure where they're at. Be clear about that. If they're really strong on one side or the other, be clear about that. But I just don't like that. The one criterion for clarity was if it's on the website or not. Because from my vantage point, these are conversations that belong over the table, over bread, and in face-to-face embodied relationships. And one of the problems is that for traditional churches, the traditional view of marriage has been so stigmatized as being anti-gay. You think all gay people are going to hell, or if they get saved, they have to become straight. So if I have a statement that's, for lack of better terms, is a non-affirming statement, people are going to say, oh, okay, so that church is anti-gay. They hate gay people and think they're creepy and all this kind of, stuff that we created for ourselves from the moral majority in the 1980s and 90s. Like we provided people with that kind of impression of the traditional view. So what I don't want people to do is to read a statement. This is one of the big problems I have with the Nashville statement.
Nashville statement, absolutely.
Just read the statement and then read into that all this baggage that has been created over the years, and that that they're going to assume that I am a certain kind of person. I mean, and even like I think people have blurred this. They have blurred sexual ethics with loving people, so that
dude, that's the big one. That's the big one.
So here, I mean, I'm constantly trying to push people to in a sense, separate those two.
How could you love somebody, Preston, if you disagree with who they are?
See, that's the
right. That's how it comes across, right?
And so here's what I try to say, and I'm not saying this irons it out, but my view is that, it's as succinctly as I can say it. As a Christian, I believe in the historically Christian view that sex difference is part of what marriage is, and that all sexual relationships are intended to be expressed within that covenant bond, period, the end. We include everybody. What is inclusion? Inclusion is including people by the grace and forgiveness and love of Jesus into a community seeking sanctification, holiness, and repentance. And its sexual ethic is one aspect of what we're including people into. So all people are welcome, and all does mean all. But to my radically affirming friends, all means all. We include everybody. We don't point the finger at anybody. I'm like, okay, great. That's awesome. So I got my buddies, and he's in the KKK. He wants to come to church with his white hood on. Is that cool? Well, yeah, but he's got to take that hat off. And I'm like, I agree, man. But don't make it about including versus including. The only disagreement is sexual ethics. And any genuine Christian is going to draw the line somewhere on sexual ethics, and I may draw it differently than you, but don't make it about you're inclusive and I'm not. We just have a different sexual ethic that we are including all people into. Now, I'm speaking for myself, and I would definitely say many evangelical churches are excluding gay people.
Absolutely.
So that's part of the problem. But, people talk about, man, why don't you want to include LGBTQ people in your church? I said, I would be so honored to submit to a gay pastor. Transgender identified pastor, a queer it's not even about those identities for me. And this gets me in trouble with those on the right. For me, it's about, is the person living faithfully to Jesus according to the sexual ethic that I do believe is the biblical historical ethic that we are living by.
But if you use that test, Preston, then almost all of our straight pastors would disappear, right? Because
you're not allowed to be tempted by sexual temptations. Then
totally,
and really.
Right. I have a friend who has struggled with pornography his whole life, and has been seeing huge victory in that. And these are, here Christian, this is so Christianese, right? Struggle with and victory. But he's seen a great degree of progress. He works for a pretty well-known Christian institution, and he stumbled. Again, Christian word. He looked at porn for maybe 15 minutes. And it had been the first time in like 6 months. I mean, he was just doing great.
Yeah.
And then he got, randomly or not, an email that we know is a scam, but it was like, hey, dude, we got footage of you on your webcam doing this, and we're gonna send it to everyone in your contact list unless you X, Y, and Z. Now, I would hear that and I'd go, well, that's stupid. That's a scam. My very conscience-stricken friend heard that and went to his boss.
Oh, wow.
And said, hey, I got this email. Now, my friend didn't know that the email had been sent to the whole organization as just a scam. But he went and he confessed, hey, I had this 15-minute episode where I looked at porn. It was the first time in, a very, very long time. And 2 hours later, they fired him. No explanation.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. I mean, just boom. And so
60% of its leaders are looking at porn for more than
exactly. That's it. So my question is, so whenever I say, hey, I think the creational ideals in Genesis 1 and 2, technically I don't even live up to that. If you take the words of the Sermon on the Mount seriously about lust.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, I probably push it. I'm with you in pushing it because I'm sitting here thinking, if that's the test, if how well I hold to my sexual ethic is the test, well, I don't even consistently hold to my sexual ethic.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good. I mean, it's this kind of posture that is going to reopen up many conversations and avenues for the LGBT community to sort of reconsider the church, because one of the biggest complaints is the hypocrisy.
Oh my goodness!
There's so much stuff that we turn a blind eye to, or are allowed to struggle with, and they're just like, why can't I struggle out loud? The biggest difference for me is there's a difference between struggling with sin versus calling sin righteousness. So to me, and I'm a huge grace guy. I mean, I probably to a fault. I'm like,
that was a good book.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. I tried to push it as far as I could, and so for me, it's not the struggle. I just want to create large open spaces for people to struggle out loud with anything. And because of the nature I'm in ministry, I might get all kinds of stuff with people with unwanted desires for really, all kinds of sexual fetishes. I can go on and on and on. This isn't just an LGBTQ versus straight. This is like, there's so many things that people are struggling with, desires that they don't want, that they didn't choose. The biggest difference for me, though, is, are we kind of pursuing the Genesis 1 and 2 ideal imperfectly with space for failure and forgiveness versus celebrating, and pursuing not that, so. Yep. Yeah.
And that's where the pastoral issue gets so tricky.
Yeah.
Because if you're conservative on this, wouldn't you want people to be brought in, even if they're loud and proud? Yeah. Wouldn't you want people to be brought into the orbit of word and spirit and community?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And so that was our thing at the church, and we did it imperfectly, and we hurt some people for sure. We would allow people to share their stories, and we didn't know how to handle stories where the one of the punchlines was, why I just embraced being gay, and I got married to my dream, and this person rescued me, and we were super. I was still working it out, but to create space, you had to. There are people who are loud and proud about their lust issue or their greed issue or their pride issue, right? So where do you even draw that line between, we don't want to baptize unrighteousness, right? But I also don't want to order someone's discipleship either.
Yeah.
Like if somebody comes in and they just have a huge ego and everyone is like, dude, this dude is a jerk. Yeah. I don't lead with that, right? I sit and I go, well, bringing into the orbit of word, spirit, Eucharist, and community, maybe God opens that up.
And there are, with somebody like that, huge egos, or people that are kind of type A++ personalities where they're just steamrolling over people without realizing it and are insensitive and whatever. Like, we would give them a generous leash or a generous time frame for what it's going to take to work this out. I mean, some people go to the grave with just stanky stubbornness, and just bullheadedness and all these things that are violating all kinds of. So I think giving people space, that discipleship is a really sometimes torturous, long, messy process. And we allow it for some people, but not for others. Or as one of my friends said, we're most likely to vilify the sins that we're least
not
likely to commit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you? Because I mean, I would imagine your church context had, and for my audience, I mean, your audience knows, but my audience, I want to revisit this actually. But so if you don't know Mike Erre, I'm gonna, we're like a half hour into the conversation, or I'll add a separate intro to this, and I'll tell them who you are. But yeah, so you for the last several years up until you moved to Ohio, you had this church community that grew out of your podcast. Did you have a wide spectrum of conservatives, more progressive?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was beautiful.
So how did that work? I mean,
that was Preston. It was the coolest thing ever.
Really?
So these are just snapshots.
Yeah.
So here's the white guy and a mullet. I kid you not, with a Trump T-shirt, taking communion behind an illegal immigrant. Okay?
Are you serious? Yeah.
Unbelievable. Married, same-sex couples taking communion with people that think that married same-sex couples are going to burn in hell. I mean, it was unbelievable. Huh?
So with both those examples, are they like looking at the other person and like, I can't believe they're here. I'm not going to be able to stay here. Or are they actively trying to like, how can I love this person? Both. Yeah.
Both. Yeah. I mean, we on both sides of the issue, we had gay folks that would come and because we wanted to build the church on the idea that the church should be the safest place to talk about anything. And because we believe in sin and we believe in grace and we believe in redemption, right? So what's going to surprise us and what's going to cause us to lose hope? Nothing.
Yeah.
And we began, I mean, the biggest thing we did was built the church on the Eucharist. And I come from a very non-sacramental background. But I was having conversation with Rob Bell after his, after a lot of controversy, and I'd asked him a pretty cheesy question, but I asked him, hey, if you were going to start a church now, knowing what you know, what would you do differently? And he said, I would build it on the Eucharist. I would build it on the weekly celebration of the Eucharist, and that so resonated with some stuff because I'd been studying communion. And this idea of a closed table, I just don't see it. I mean, you talk about controversy. Just don't see it in the Bible.
Can we get into that real quick? Because I'm so let me. I'll try to keep this really short because I don't want to break up your. As I see the early communion in 1 Corinthians 11, if you study the kind of background there, you got this house church of maybe 20 to maybe 50 max people. The communion is at the very least part of an actual meal, if not the meal itself.
That. Yeah.
So that what would it look like for you to bring your non-believer to that meeting, your non-believing friend, and to say, hey, I know I brought you to this meeting that's the focus of this gathering is a big meal we're going to celebrate together. You're not allowed to eat. Dinner time.
Right.
So if you just sit over there, we're going to eat. We're going to eat this luscious meal. We have got good wine here, good homemade bread. And after we're done, then we're going to do some teaching. And you can be a part of that, but you can't be part of the meal.
Totally.
It's just odd, right? But then my intention is, just like practically, I'm like, of course non-believers were, of course they were. Like that's what they were there for, is to dine with them. But then what about, aren't there statements that do imply that partaking of the meal, you are part of the body of Christ? Or what are there verses that?
Yeah. Now this is what I was studying. This is so good, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. So I came from a church community that practiced communion 4 times a year after foot washing. All right. It was like the biggest, most sacred deal. candles, no fluorescent lights. I mean, it was a huge deal. And I've always I inherited the traditional view, right? That you have to examine yourself and you have to confess your sin before you can come to the table. And there were times when I was dating and I was physically involved with somebody, I would not take communion because I'm like, I don't want to bring judgment on myself.
I don't want to die. I don't want to sleep.
Exactly. I don't want to sleep, whatever that means. And so I was doing a series on 1 Corinthians and I got to 11. And I read the chapter in context, shockingly, and discovered that it wasn't non-Christians being warned away. It was rich Christians being critiqued for shaming the poor Christians.
Right.
And people push back instantly. They're like, but they got to examine themselves and recognize the body. Okay. When you go into 1 Corinthians 12, and again, there's no chapter division there. What's the body? The body isn't the body of Jesus, it's the body of Christ.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
So what they were doing is tearing the body of Christ asunder, in the way they were shaming non-Christian, or they were shaming the Christian poor. We know from 1 Corinthians 14 there were non-believers in these gatherings, right? Because Paul says if you're going to speak in a tongue, you have to interpret it, or people are going to think you're nuts.
Yeah.
But not once in his whole discussion does he warn them not to take the Lord's Supper. The only warning was given to the Christians, and not just any Christian, but to the rich Christians that were eating ahead of the poor.
Yes.
Because the whole thing, he sums up I think it's the last verse in chapter 30, or chapter 11, verse 30, I think. He simply says, so then, come together when you eat. And then he moves on. And that had nothing to do with examining yourself. I literally sat in a church where the pastor said, hey, you got to get cleaned up. Like, if you're going to go out to eat, you get cleaned up. If you come to the Lord's table, you got to get cleaned up. And that is the biggest bunch of BS.
You can say it.
No, well, I don't know how raw is theology in the raw. And it was so shocking, and so many people were offended. Because I left EV Free Fullerton. Our first podcast is Why Gay Marriage is Good for the Church. And it was non-controversial stuff. I mean, but it was like, it forces us to admit our hypocrisy. It forces us to talk about sexuality besides no. Like, duh.
Yeah.
And then we open a church where women can lead and open communion is practiced, and I'm a heretic or something.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, but guys, read the freaking Bible. It never warns non-Christians.
Yeah.
And in fact, if the first communion meal was based on Passover had stipulations for the alien and in its practice.
Well, and so the statement to wait for one another. Here's what I read about the background. And Moyer Hubbard is great. Do you know Moyer? Do you know him? Yeah,
I do.
He's got this. He was saying that, like, in that world, rich people didn't have to work, if at all, very much. So they would be free by 2:00 in the afternoon. Then they'd go to the bathhouses for a couple hours. Then they would go to the community, the gathering. This is the church now. You have rich Christians and poor Christians, which you crystal clear throughout Corinthians. This is one of the biggest problems, is the rich versus poor thing. So you have the rich Christians showing up early. The poor Christians are having to work all day. They're getting there at 6, 7, 8 at night. And so when he says wait for one another, he's telling the rich Christians to don't eat ahead of time. Don't you have houses to eat in? Here you are. You're already drunk by the time the poor people show up. You're not considering the body, meaning the poor believers in the body. Wait for one another. In other words, you rich Christians, wait until the poor Christians get off work. If you're hungry, then you can eat or whatever. But when you come together for the meal, you need to all come together.
That's right.
Together.
Because they would eat in a separate place. They would eat at a separate time. And some would argue they were eating separate food.
Yeah, the higher quality, they would eat all the good stuff.
Yes. So they were shaming. I mean, so they took what was meant to be a unifying act, and they used it to shame the poor Christians. And because of that, Paul says, some of you have fallen asleep. And that's an Ananias and Sapphira thing, I think.
Wow.
Right? Because how rich and poor interacted was super, super important in the early church. Right? So Ananias and Sapphira wasn't about whether or not they gave all the money. It was the fact that they were shaming the church by keeping some for themselves while claiming they were giving it all. So to me, this ties in to God's. Why did we have those random incidents where God's striking people down in the New Testament? Well, to me, it is a rich and poor issue where the church had to be shown in the ugliest way possible that the honor shame and the patron client relationships that dominated interaction simply did not apply in the church. And they could not apply for the church to be the church. So I don't know how we go from there to you have to confess your sin before you take the bread and the cup, to then unbelievers, you have to be a disciple of Jesus. We would have international students who would come to our community. We had a woman in our community who loved international students. So we'd have 8 or 9 people coming from Korea or other places in Asia, and some of whom were Christian, many of whom were not. And we would, and every week we made the table the center, and that would always give us the opportunity, of course, to explain the gospel, right? I mean, and that was beautiful, but we would invite, and they would come. So here's some Buddhists, right, who don't know what they're doing. So you're telling me Jesus of Nazareth is going to strike them down, or we had a believing wife and an atheistic husband. One of our first weekends. Show up, and the atheist had never taken communion with his wife. He just thought the whole thing was nonsense. So for whatever reason, for the first time in their 40 years of marriage, he walks down with her and takes the bread and the cup. And you're going to tell me that Jesus of Nazareth is pissed? Come on.
What about the road to Emmaus? I'm trying to, I don't have my Bible. Well, I do have a Bible, but I don't feel like opening it. Okay. So Luke 24, road to Emmaus. I think they say at least 2 times that it was through the breaking of bread that their eyes were open. Is that, I mean, I don't want to get too hung up on the order, but I just wonder.
No, that's right. That's right.
The breaking of the bread is the means through which God might open eyes, not make sure your eyes are open and then you're allowed to take the bread, right? Isn't that?
Yes. It's like baptism. Do you have to get cleaned up before you get baptized? No. Baptism is the indication that you are opening yourself up for the cleaning, correct?
Well, what about, so baptism though does come after, repent and be baptized. Like you are wanting to go down this journey, right?
Absolutely. And how morally pure do you have to be to be baptized?
At all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Correct?
Yeah.
And yes, it's an introductory rite that's different than communion, which is a sustaining rite. Totally acknowledge and get that. If someone were a Buddhist and did not want to affirm Jesus as Lord, I would not baptize them.
Right. So what's the biggest pushback then? What's the people listening? Like I may get more emails than you do. Although our audiences are our audiences are kind of the same. They're gonna, even if they don't totally agree with what we're saying, they're gonna love the conversation. But
they give grace. Yes.
What would be the biggest pushback to everything that you're saying? Because I'm thinking out loud here. You're probably further ahead in this than I. I've always thought it odd that if it's an early meal,
right, be
either part of a meal or the meal itself. What would it look like for unbelievers to be excluded from that? So that's my biggest hang up. But what would be, if you can play devil's advocate to everything you're saying, what would the one hang up be?
Well, the other argument I use for this is Jesus's table fellowship with sinners.
Okay.
That Jesus would have table fellowship with people before they repented.
Now, is that directly related to the later communion?
Well, and that's the objection. The objection is, and it's a good one, table fellowship isn't communion. And then my question is, okay, in what ways is it different? And in what ways then does it become more exclusive? Tell me that. Is it only, right? Because, and I understand the objection being made for sure. My counter is simply, we've turned communion into some sort of magic. Right? It was a meal. It was a reenactment. I think Christ is present in some way. I mean, I don't think it's just bread and wine. I think Paul seems to indicate with his parallel about demons, right? He's like, you're participating with demons when you eat that idol meat. So somehow we're participating in some mystery bigger than us. But I see, A, no warning against unbelievers. B, the only warning is against believers, and it was specifically, and if he didn't name the specific circumstance, then I would say, absolutely, we got to be really careful with this. But he names the circumstance, he gives a prescription for how to do it differently, and then he moves on, and then in later, 3 chapters later, he's talking about what to do when unbelievers are there. He says nothing about the Lord's table. He just simply says, interpret your freaking tongues. So the best argument
that's the
I've heard
translation there, interpret your freaking.
So the best translation or the best argument against it is the idea that, hey, people were falling asleep. We don't know if that's the only circumstance where people were falling asleep. And do you really want to push it? Like, if this is for disciples, right? It's a celebration of the risen, right? As often as you celebrate it, you're not only remembering, but you're anticipating. So how can you have somebody participate in a rite divorced from its meaning?
So I do have my Bible open now. So in 11:27, whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord. So that unworthy manner is specifically in this context.
Yeah, keep reading.
Okay. Let a person examine himself, then, and so eat the bread and drink the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body.
Come on.
That's rich Christians not considering the rest of the body, namely the poor Christians. Eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died, this translation says. But if we judge ourselves truly, we would not be judged. So when we are
keep
judged,
going,
Lord,
keep going.
So then, my brothers, when you come together, wait for one another. And that to me, that is crystal clear. It is rich believers waiting for poor believers to get off work so they can come join the meal.
Yeah. Now, I would then add this from that specific instance. I think Paul does broaden it to perceiving the body, right? I mean, he says that, examine yourselves. And I take that to mean that if you were participating in communion in a way that invalidates its central message, you are eating and drinking judgment upon yourself. Okay,
so there is a broader application of...
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think there is. Right. And so nothing specific comes to mind other than, if you restricted communion to those who tithe, right. You would be eating and drinking judgment upon yourself. I just think I think it's an honor shame thing more than it is a sexual purity thing.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is where the big mistake we've made is we've reduced holiness to sexual purity.
Right.
And in the American church. And that's why we only disqualify people, for sex. But we're now starting to disqualify people for greed and ego and hallelujah for all of that. Yeah. Hey, and by the way, dude, if you were going to start a church, right? So we've seen Bill Hybels, who man, I was a fan.
Have you,
James? What do you think's going on? You've got the sexual abuse scandals for the SBC. I mean, dude, isn't it crazy right now?
Well, I think I don't have much to add to that except what I think you would say and what other people are saying. Just we've structured church that sort of elevates and isolates this kind of senior leader, and I mean, in all those situations. The word on the street is, these leaders that fall, they did have a bunch of kind of yes men around them, but no genuine openness and accountability, or even space where the leader could say, hey, I watched 15 minutes of porn last night, and people would come up and say, hey, would love to be an accountability or whatever, help you out, rather than you're fired on the spot and there's no place for redemption. Could Bill Hybels, were structures in place where he could have came up on a Sunday morning and said, you know what? I was inappropriate with a woman last week, nothing, we didn't go all the way or whatever, but there's an emotional thing going on here, and I inappropriate hugging. She called me on it. I'm really sorry. And I really want to do better. That wouldn't have been a category. There's no possibility for leaders to be as fragile as they really are. But those are structures that we've built to put in place to where we elevate these kind of leaders. They're not allowed to kind of struggle with stuff, or have genuine accountability where somebody could say at an elder meeting, Bill, man, you're out of line here. And he would say, you're right, rather than don't you dare. And I don't know, but no, I've heard stories where it's not with Bill in particular, but with these kind of, high profile, powerful leaders that build big churches and big movements typically are the kind, this is going to be an overstatement, are a kind of personality that naturally doesn't do well when they're confronted or called out, right? I mean, isn't that,
yeah, the narcissists have run amok. and I only know because I'm a recovering one. So
you were a senior leader at least 3 different mega churches. So
come on, baby.
What's your how come you didn't fall, or did you, or what? or is what I'm saying about the structure is that, have you experienced that?
Absolutely. So it's a double-edged sword. You either have structures in place that are too oppressive, or you have structures in place that are just theoretical.
Okay.
And because the argument is, well, you can't really hold someone accountable, right? And sometimes accountability is just a ruse for control and manipulation, or whatever. So I one of the churches I came in, we were doing prayer requests in the elder meeting, and the prayer requests were fine. They were about, my son or my friend or my whatever. And I just was like, no, I really want to establish who they're dealing with here. So I said, listen, guys, would you pray for me on Mondays? Because if I'm going to look at porn and overeat, it's going to be on Monday, right? After preaching on Sunday. And like a pin, it was like, oh, I can only imagine what was going through their heads. But what I found is I don't know of many wise older people who are willing to coach, walk through, mentor somebody who would make a statement like that. Right? It's just easier to, well, hey, he'll confess, or to trust a structure, or to just say, well, okay, you're fired. It's much, much harder to say. It's not just that I looked at porn and I struggled, years ago, but like 2 nights ago, I was watching this, right? I mean, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So for me, the good-hearted structures are fine, but they're not the important thing.
Yeah.
Are there people old enough and wise enough to discern in a case-by-case basis what actually disqualifies someone and what's part of just the regular working out of faith?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because
totally.
now it's like the sins are so egregious when and you're like, oh my goodness, how'd they let this go this far? Or they're so freaking trivial, like my friend, who, man, if that would disqualify me, I should be disqualified a zillion times over.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, you could have all the structures in the world. It doesn't matter. To have a humble enough pastor, which is, asking a lot, because I'm very prideful and know that pride well. But then also having people who are gracious, who can look at you and say, man, yeah, you're freaking horn dog and you need to stop this, but that doesn't mean you can't preach on Sunday.
Yeah. Oh man. You started asking me if I was going to start a church, what would it be? And then it spilled over into this. What was what were you going to ask though?
The thing that, cause I was saying, hey, we only disqualify people from sex. And then it got into, but that's changing, thankfully, now pride and now greed. But one of the questions I'd written down to just ask you is, you've seen a lot of the church.
Yeah.
Francis has been on such an interesting journey with the church. And you've traveled a bunch. And I was just like, I'm curious, like if you were going to start one, what would it be like? What would it be like for you?
Well, I did a couple of years ago, year and
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
It was basically a distant affiliation with Francis's our church out in San Francisco. So it was that model. There's no income, everything's kind of volunteer. We didn't have seats to begin with. I wanted to make it so uncomfortable that as few people could come as possible. So we didn't provide chairs. It's like, hey, if you want to sit down, you can, go find a chair. Sure enough, the next week, some guy pitched in and bought a bunch of chairs from Costco. I was like, dang it, I didn't know. So, I mean, I am very, I guess, well, where did I start? I have grown less critical of the church over the last couple of years, I would say. I went through a slow growing period of being kind of critical, then I grew into cynicism, and to the worst point was I was just kind of fed up of just church, like this just seems so distant from the New Testament. What are we even doing? And for me, the big one too is, just how much money is, how expensive it is to break bread and pray. I'm serious. It's so expensive. It's like, I don't know what I know church planners that they need to raise $250,000 before they can even break bread and pray. And I'm using that, I'm being kind of facetious a little bit, but I mean, I think, so overly complicated and expensified. There's got to be a better word than that. The existence of a community of people that practically a lot of ministries moving forward in 2019 and beyond are not going to be able to function because we don't know how to do ministry.
That's right.
Simply anymore. And that's just a fact. I mean, the whole boom of the 1980s, those people are dying off. I mean, talk to any church planter. I know church planters have like 800 people in their church, and they're all like millennials and Gen Z, so which they don't give any money and they don't make any money anyway. And so, it's like, I can, they have like one part-time paid staff, 800 people. So
totally,
you're not going to be able to afford the all the bells and whistles. So for me, my big passions are genuine discipleship and relationships. Let's cut the Christian BS. If you show up to church and somebody says, how you're doing, say, I'm doing good, except as I'm pouring all night last night. You're like, oh man, me too. Let's pray together. Let's go take bread together. And like, I want it to be just create an environment where you can't belong to this community unless you are completely pursuing an authentic, broken, imperfect walk with Jesus. So authentic relationships is a huge priority for me. Simplicity is a huge priority for me. I've backed off the no paid pastor thing because that's what we tried to do. And I think it can work in some contexts, and it is working in Chan's. I mean, leaders are being trained, people are getting saved right and left, discipleship's happening, and they now have 16, 20 different house churches all networked together. And not a single penny has gone into the sustaining the ministry. No pastor's ever taken a dime. So it's working for them. Now they have a unique cultural, geographical context. They have Francis Chan's unique. So, I mean, I used to think this is the way to do it. And now I'd say it's one way, but even I'm all for releasing people for ministry and even paying them well. Like I pay my Christian dentist well. Why can't I pay my Christian pastor extremely well? So I want to see a simple church where everything is intentionally surrounding, the mission of the church, reaching the community and discipling people. If money is not isn't directly related to that. So I'm pretty, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we can buy chairs, maybe not. I mean, if you would go to a Green Bay Packers game in 20 degree below and stand for 4 hours, then you can have a building. If not, if it's 10 degrees out and you come to church and you want to stand under a overpass and worship God that way, and then I'm like, I kind of shrug my shoulders and say, let's do that, And, well, we wouldn't have anybody come. Then I'm like, well, maybe they're not committed. Maybe they need to. But if our and even that, I just get annoyed. It's now I'm centering it on the service, and so I do think the gathering of believers is always central, but the modern day church service, I think, has, I don't know. And here's where I don't want to come down too harsh, because I do see more value in that than maybe I used to. I don't want to downplay that.
I get it.
I just, instead of church services and so much time, energy, and focus and personnel and staff and going into pulling off a church service, which is largely directed at keeping or drawing people. And no one would say that explicitly, or a few people, well, actually a lot of people would, but I mean, I want time, money, resources being directed at the gathering of believers, in as much as that furthers the mission and discipleship of the church.
I'd want the same thing that I would want from World Vision or from Compassion International. Right. The most amount of my money going to the mission.
Right. Yeah.
And the least amount of money going to overhead.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
And that's where podcasting's so interesting, because take the last church, the last big church I was a part of. It's $10 million budget. Yeah. 8,000 people, over the course of a month. I mean, they wouldn't all show up at once. 120 staff, 20 acres.
Yeah.
And now you can, and the sermon was seen as, kind of central to the whole deal. Now,
for most of those thousands of people, coming and listening to the sermon is a big part of what they're paying for, in a sense, right?
That's right. Right. But now, right, we put out a podcast, and it gets downloaded how many tens of thousands of times, and it's free. Yeah. So if all the service is an information system, it's going to go the way of the dinosaur, right? Because there are just so many cheaper ways to do it. So what was interesting about what we were trying to do was to say, okay, well, let's take the sermon out of it. Like, we had a teaching, but we opened the service with it, and it was designed to lead to the Eucharist, right? So we had a teaching, but we had a podcast too. And I mean, no one needs, the vast majority of people in churches don't need more information.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm totally with you on it. And I do think we go through a church cynicism phase.
Yeah. You think that's good?
I think it's necessary. I don't know that it's good. I just think that there's no way to love the church for who she is without being first terribly disillusioned with her.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
And it's kind of like forgiveness. There's no way to forgive somebody unless you acutely feel every bit of the hurt they did to you.
Yeah, that's good.
And so to that, and that's why I haven't given up, right? Yeah. I think there are things you can do to minimize damage and minimize the potential for damage and abuse. But at the end of the day, I'm saved into a people, right? And I need to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
And that's the downside of podcasting, as you know. We're just isolated white male straight voices.
Yeah.
And the world needs more. The world needs more. That's what the world needs more of.
That, I thought about the podcast thing, and like, you can do a podcast and draw a pretty big crowd if you're having interesting conversations. If my podcast, your podcast, was me preaching a traditional sermon, I don't think I'd have nearly as many people. So this is what I do. I would love to maybe encourage pastors, or you asked me about me. So if I was going to start a church again, I would explore multiple ways to have rich, thoughtful, honest conversations about God and faith and politics. If there's a racial shooting, a shooting racially motivated on Tuesday or Saturday,
we
would be talking about that on Sunday. We wouldn't be doing John chapter 6 or whatever. Like, it would be like,
right.
I want. And it would be, I'm a big fan of dialogical teaching. We live in an age, there's this thing called the internet, and it's completely changed the way culture absorbs information. It now absorbs information in a much more dialogical manner, whereas in even news articles on CNN, you can respond, you can ask questions, whatever.
Totally. Well, think about how news is presented. It's not an anchor anymore. It's a big conversation.
Totally. For us to, as a church, to still just have monologues, close in prayer, and give no space for people to process, even out loud, or respond, that just, it will change. It's just, it needs, we need to kind of understand that the era of the kind of oration, the monologue, it worked well for, from the Reformation up until the internet. We now live in a different cultural environment where dialogue, conversation is the primary form of how people learn. Why is Joe Rogan the most popular podcast when he'll have people on for 3 hours and just talk? Also, the intellectual depth and honesty needs to be way elevated in the church. People are hungry, super hungry for honest reflection and intellectual conversations and stuff, because they do it, Monday through Saturday. They're asking really hard questions. They're thinking through complexities about race and immigration and faith and culture, politics, and sexuality and gender and all these things. And we get to Sunday, and sometimes we again are doing a youth group sermon on steroids, and it's just people are, and I think people just kind of go with it, and I often hear people, that was such a good sermon, and then ask them, well, what'd you get out of it? Like, why? I don't know, man. I can't really remember, but man, my heart was moved, and God works through that, but I just,
of course.
Again, going back to why are deeply intellectual podcasts so incredibly popular? Why is Jordan Peterson a quasi-Christianish, not really, whatever? How does he fill a room?
I know.
Thousands of people, and he's talking about the Bible and using in-depth Jungian psychological garb, and half the room are non-believers, and they're coming to hear him talk about Noah and the flood for 3 hours.
Right.
And he, I think pastors would be like, I can never do that. And they wouldn't if you preach a sermon for 3 hours, but if you did something that is intellectually incredibly off the chart and compelling and honest. And he's not even, I don't even think Jordan Peterson's all that clear, really. I mean, every other word, I'm like, I'm trying to follow his thinking. But people are interested in deep things about life, culture, faith, the Bible. And you made a statement, and I'm going to pass the ball back to you. But
no, Preston, I love it.
If I get one of the most common things I hear, just going back to the sexuality conversation, from gay or lesbian couples that are going to traditional churches that don't go to the many affirming churches that they can go to. Mm-hmm. And I have a quote, actually, a megachurch leader in Denver, 12,000 people. He says, man, we have so many lesbian couples showing up. And I ask him, why there's actually many affirming churches in Denver. Why are you coming here? They say, because you teach the Bible in depth. Mm-hmm. If we're going to wake up on a Sunday and actually go to church, we're not just to go and be yet again affirmed that nothing's wrong with us. You're not doing anything wrong. There's no sin, no repentance, no brokenness. Everything's great. And they're like, we know that's not true. We want to hear some thoughtful depth, and we want to be challenged. We want her to be stirred up, So I think that's just a hunger in the heart of so many people. They want to engage in thoughtful conversations about faith, politics,
in the context of meaningful authenticity.
Absolutely.
So we're all journeying together.
Yeah.
It's not a expert and I've got it. Yeah. No, totally. Dude, that's so good. That's so good. And that I think that's why people tune in, to podcasts. I mean, I'm continually surprised. I don't know if you ever think of this, but I'm continually surprised that people listen.
Yeah. No, totally. I am shocked every time I get an email saying, "Hey, I listened to you on the podcast." I'm like, "Whoa, people are actually listening to this thing." Right.
I'm just shocked. And so anyway, but dude, that's so good. I need to get my kid off the bus in about 15 minutes.
Oh, you gotta go. Yeah.
No. Hold on. We're not doing that. I want to talk about this event, and this is particularly for Ohio listeners.
Oh yeah.
We have a bunch of those. You're coming to Cleveland to do one of the Institute events, or the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender events. So tell us about that, because I want people to know about that.
Yeah.
And to either grab their churches or their staffs or whatever and go up to Cleveland. I'm in Columbus, which is about a 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
What day is it?
So I don't have it in front of me. Is it April 23rd, I think?
Yeah, I have all the information.
You were trying to throw me a softball, and I watched it go down the middle and strike one. Yeah, April 23rd. It's a Tuesday from 8:30 to 3:30. All the information is on our website, centerforfaith.com. If you go to either our events link or specifically our Leaders Forum link, you'll see the event for Cleveland, April 23rd. So what it is, it's called a Leaders Forum on Faith, Sexuality, and Gender. We spend all day talking about faith, sexuality, and gender. So about a third of what we do is just talk about relationships. Try to humanize this conversation. I tell lots of stories about LGBT people in the church and their experience. We always have a panel of LGBT Christians that share their story, which is always a highlight of the day. We spend a third digging into theology. We look at what does the Bible say about marriage, same-sex relationships, what are some pushbacks, kind of like what we did earlier, address. Mm-hmm. And I try to do that I don't want to stir up the crowd that is looking for ammunition to win an argument, but I do want to say that the traditional view of marriage, it has credibility to it. It's not just some tradition we've assumed. And then a third of what we do is we look at questions like membership and service and leadership. And what does this look like on the ground? Again, some of the stuff we're talking about, if I get a nickel for every pastor that emails me saying, dude, I preached the gospel last Sunday and a lesbian couple came forward hand in hand. They're so excited to follow Jesus. They have 2 kids. Now what do I do?
Right.
And so we wrestle with some of those questions, and there's no real, black and white, easy answer to those. But it's, we typically get anywhere from, all the way from like 100 to 300, typically 200 to 300 pastors and leaders. Awesome. It's open to anybody. It's called the Leaders Forum, but we get a lot of parents with LGBT kids. We get people that are leading Christian ministries or people that are just interested in learning more. So it really is open to all. So yeah, would love to see any of you out there in Ohio coming to.
Yeah, come on, OH. I think that. So for me, I get a lot of questions for people who are entering into this conversation.
Yeah.
And they'll say, hey, if I'm looking for the best non-affirming book and the best affirming book, where do I start?
Right.
And so you don't have to agree with the traditional view to get something out of this.
No, I would say an overwhelming majority would be on the non-affirming or traditional side, but in fact, I did one in San Diego, and there was a whole table of like pretty high profile affirming Christian leaders, and they, obviously they disagree to some things and let me know about that. But they were like, man, this is, as one guy said, yeah, I don't want to repeat it, but it was kind of like, of this, toxic theology, yours is the best presentation of it. I'm like, I didn't. But one of the first words out of my mouth when we started is, if you're here and you are affirming or LGBTQ and whatever, I'm so glad you're here. I want this to be a safe place for you. If it doesn't feel like that, you come tell me, and I will make sure that you are not being sort of judged, critiqued. We want this to be a safe place for people to think out loud. Along with those on the far right, they're saying, I want to kick every gay person out of my church. How what do you think about that? I'm like, thank you for being honest. Let's talk about that. So, one quick thing, you do have to register for the event. I should tell people that. Some people show up the day of, and they do sell out oftentimes. So definitely register ahead of time.
Does it cost anything?
It does. Yeah, it's $95 for a single person, $85 for a group of 4 or more. Or if you're a seminary student, it's half off, 50%.
That's what I'm talking about.
You do get, it's free lunch. You get free resources. You get resources that are part of that package. So I have had some people say, man, why do you charge? Why do you charge so much? I've never had we haven't had a single person, I don't think, leave that I've heard about after they go through it saying, man, that really wasn't worth my money. The response has been really, really good. So.
Yeah. Why do you charge for it? Oh, I don't know, because there's work involved
I know, right?
and there's value given.
Yeah. Well, I spent, $130,000 on, 10 years of education.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, that's so good, man. Preston, it's so good to see your face, hear your voice.
You too, man.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate the conversation. Thank you. And we are big fans of Theology in the Raw. Love what you're doing. Love the candid, fun. I love that you do Q&A too. I don't think we do enough of that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, man, well done. Thanks for your time today.
You too. We got to do this again. This was fun.
All right, my man.
All right. Peace out, y'all.